Yeah, as Gianni said, as Professor Rialta said, I'm Linda Bernstein. I'm the Vice President of Education at DigiMentors, which is a digital consulting firm, and we do everything from live streaming to helping major companies hire good people. I mean, like we're very wide digital media consultancy. And on the right there, you can see those are my various social media accounts that can be followed. And I'm responsive. If you have questions, you can get to me on Twitter at Wordwhacker, on LinkedIn at Linda Bernstein, PhD, and at LinkedIn and on Instagram at Wordwhacker. Can you advance, please? So this is me in Lucca in 2014 when Professor Rialta asked me to speak at a conference there. And at that point, you can see the arrow pointing to me, and then there's an arrow pointing to some other journalists who are there. And at that point, I was really optimistic about the future of journalism and what was happening with digital. I just thought that journalists were going to have so many new tools and that digital was just like a big boost to journalism. Can you advance the slide? There were some tools and apps that I thought were really, I'm making fun of myself here by saying the bomb, but I thought there was many of them, and these in particular, I thought were really adding a lot and giving journalists some really good tools. One was Paperly, another one was Scoop It, and what these two apps did is they enabled people to choose topics that they were interested in, just like let's say they were interested in the environment, and so they would have like choose like water supply as one thing, and um, like forest fires as another thing, and then they would name their paper. I'm using air quotes for paper here. And it looked like sort of like a front page of a paper when they would publish it. It would be published every every day if they chose, and people who were quoted, which usually meant that they picked up a tweet of yours, would be you'd get a notification. What Paperly and Scoop It and others were doing was complete aggregation. It was all automated. It was really, in a way, pretty dumb, except that a lot of journalists were using it at that point to gather information. And that's always a good tool to have. The At that point, the app I liked the best, and it's the one I'm showing on my iPad there in Luca, was Flipboard. And the reason I liked Flipboard is that it was really a curation app, not an aggregation app. And what it did was enable people to create, again, air quotes here, magazines on certain topics. And the difference with Flipboard began in 2010, which is when the iPad was introduced. In fact, it was an app that was available on the iPad at that point, and only the iPad. And so you would, from your reading, perusing of anything online, you would choose things and you would be able to put them into a Flipboard magazine that had a title. You would title it, and then it had subtitles that it picked up from the articles. It gave people a lot of flexibility. It really, journalists loved it. It was great. They expanded all over Europe. Um, the thing is, all these three things, along with other of the tools from the early days there up until about 2015, they all still exist, but they're all really geared towards marketing. Then they weren't then. They were trying to get journalists interested, and Flipboard actually had um, arrangements with certain uh, publishers, and so that people would be able to transfer information from that publisher. If you got the New York Times, you could then put an article from the New York Times into your Flipboard magazine. Can you advance, please? And then, of course, as far as news went and digital, there was Facebook. And Facebook went very quickly from being a place where you would just say hi to your friends and maybe say something about what you're doing when it started that you could add links. So people started putting on their Facebook timelines. Facebook was different then. They started putting links to news articles, and then maybe they would comment on the article. And then Facebook itself started uh, giving people news. Can you advance the slide? And it asked us to follow things. And indeed, we did follow. People really gave Facebook a lot of attention at this point, and especially in news. Can you advance the slide, please? And what we got was fake news, which Facebook has been having huge problems with ever since, and all these platforms, because news, people use these digital platforms to put up what they think is news, what they want to show as news. And there's very little monitoring by these platforms of what is real and what isn't real. Facebook and Twitter, for instance, both do some kind of labeling. If you have hit a key area that they think there might be fake news in, and then they take you to their own links about it with the label they have. But back when I was showing Flipboard um, in 2014, fake news was not yet the problem that it is now. Can you please advance the slides? But before I go on, I think when we talk about digital and journalism, there are two really important things and when we talk about fake news, there are two really important things to consider. One is that fake news existed way before there was digital. I mean, when our Cro-Magnon ancestors were sitting around a fire at night and were gossiping about what somebody in their particular group had done, and oh, so and so went out and with his bow and arrow shot a big bison. That may have been true or may not have been true. And people gossip, and gossip used to, like, there used to be these sheets. I think everybody knows this, that would be like, come off of a printing press. And this is since we've had printing, but before that, they would be handwritten and distributed, these broadsides that were sometimes full of fake news. And also, digital really has made journalism a lot easier for journalists. I mean, we now can more easily get to news. We can more easily get the news out because of what is digital. So digital is not in itself bad. Digital is in itself absolutely amazing. Next slide, please. I mean, before digital, and I'm old enough, this is true, that I would pick up the phone and dictate a story to a typist on the other end of the phone. Also, we would just used to type things, stories, and then give it to a typesetter who would then get it into the newspaper. And then on the far right there, you see floppy disks. I only recently threw out boxes of floppy disks because that's how I used to be able to get something into my computer and then somebody else's computer so that it could be typeset and go out in a magazine or newspaper or wherever. Can you advance this? Oh, and digital also, though, it opened a whole new realm, and it's the realm of the citizen journalist. And we saw this particularly, yeah, I mean, one really big example was on May 2nd in 2011 when the United States sent out a team to get Osama bin Laden. And there was a man there, a regular person, Sohaib Attar, and he started it was like between like midnight and 2 in the morning in Pakistan. And he saw something very strange going on, these blasts, and he tweeted it. And then he started tweeting more about it, and he started answering people's questions, and then he started looking at news reports. And oh, there's a picture there that another like so-called citizen journalist picked up, and that was not something that came from a traditional news wire. There was a big debate about whether Sohaib Attar was actually a citizen journalist. I mean, people said, "What? Twitter is now journalism?" But it's very interesting to see his tweets, go back to them, because it really, really shows how he was behaving in a very journalistic manner while he was reporting something that was happening before his eyes and trying to figure out what it was that was going on. Can you advance to the next slide, please? So, Twitter, yes, is used an incredible amount in news gathering, both by reporters and by people who make news. We have in countries all over the world now the heads of nations putting out their policies and hiring and firing people on social media, especially Twitter. Huge announcements come out before they come out in a traditional news source. And it's interesting that in the past 6 months, really, a relatively new platform and app to digital, TikTok, has really taken off as being a place where people go for news. And what's amazing about TikTok, because it's short video and can have background music, which is often dictation of, I mean, people speaking, and you can write captions on it. It's really amazing that the role that this has played. 4 years ago, I was trying to get my journalism students, to use TikTok. Just it was for end of semester assignment. I divided them into groups and I said, tell a story on TikTok. And at this point, I'm talking about college students. So they were like 20, 21, and they were all journalism majors. And most of them were like so annoyed with me, like because TikTok was the platform that their cousins and brothers and sisters who were in junior high were using for dance challenges. They thought I was asking them to do something so stupid. Um, can you advance the slide again? But what's happened is that this is a study from Great Britain, and you see here that TikTok is now the number 6 source of news to young people, um, uh, in Britain. This is people ages 16 to 24. And TikTok's audience is actually keeps on skewing older and over. Their hugest cohort of users is between 24 and 35. And they're not just using it for fun, they're using it to spread news. Even some of them, like there are some news publishers like the Washington Post, very early on jumped onto TikTok and was using TikTok to talk about, I mean, during the pandemic lockdown in the United States, which was March to April 2020, the Washington Post had great stuff about the pandemic that they were putting on TikTok. And to me, this is just absolutely amazing that it really is a news source. Can you advance the slide, please? So this is something that was written in The Guardian in July, and it says that how the how TikTok, what really spurred it to becoming a news gathering site and a presentation of news was the Russian invasion of Ukraine, because just regular people around Ukraine they picked up their smartphones and they started documenting what was going on in Ukraine with the Russian bombings. And this footage was viewed by over a million times, or nearly a million times, in the war's early days. It's gotten even more and more popular, but people would just go out and record something and it would get millions and millions of views. So, and this is where there was stuff going on where there weren't journalists. So this was really how people were getting facts about what Russia was doing in Ukraine. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And these are three screenshots that I took. And the first one was that this was a grandmother who was calling her friends to say goodbye because the Russians were just about to invade the small town where she lived. The middle slide, the middle screenshot is it was when Russia was claiming they were bombing only military targets, and this was, a food market that was bombed, and someone went in and filmed it and put it on TikTok. And what's happening now is that there are people who take footage themselves or get footage from people who are on the ground, and they do these TikTok videos with, as you see there, like captions that explain what's going on, so that they're either explaining while the TikTok is just recording of the sound of where the actual recording is taking place, or they are translations from Ukrainian into English and other languages. I mean, this is available in all sorts of languages because TikTok is all over the place then. Can you advance the slides, please? And yet, and this is also from The Guardian, um, uh, NewsGuard, which is an anti-misinformation operation, and they did this experiment with people who were new users to TikTok, and within um, minutes of signing on the app for the first time, they would get reports from about the what's happening in Ukraine, and a lot of the stuff would be misinformation. And at the end of the 45, they would do this for 45 minutes. The people who were doing this study found that their feeds were almost entirely, just by the TikTok algorithm, related to the war in Ukraine, and there was no distinction made between disinformation and reliable sources. So next slide, please. So there are a lot of problems with TikTok. TikTok is absolutely amazing, but someone I know who is in digital security and contracts with one of the departments in the U.S. government uh, is was appalled to find that I had TikTok on my phone. And yeah, I spend a lot of time going down the rabbit hole on TikTok. It's just, I watch video after video after video. So TikTok collects everything. Face prints, means the photograph, voice prints. It can see what's in your clipboard. The this was a major concern in the US, and the person who's in charge of TikTok for the US, for the United States, says, oh no, TikTok doesn't do that in the US. But again, people who I know who are involved in digital security said it does that. We don't know what's going on. We do know that ByteDance, which is a Chinese company that owns TikTok, well, in China, the government seems to have access to data from a lot of digital companies. And so that would be something else to be concerned about. And we have no idea. It's completely opaque. We don't know who has access to our TikTok data or how people are using it. So TikTok is amazing. I mean, we wouldn't know things without it, but it also, I don't know that at this point I would tell my students who've not on TikTok to go on TikTok. I don't know that it's a good idea. And yet you find out, I mean, you can also be like spend hours laughing because of the stuff on TikTok can be very funny if you follow the right accounts. Next slide, please, but it doesn't seem to be secure. So I guess my point is that we have access to so much. We have everything. I mean, the digital capabilities we have now as journalists, it's just astounding. You know, the phone, the processor in our phones is 100,000 times more powerful than the computer that put a man on the moon over 50 years ago. We are carrying around these incredible computers. We can report from wherever we are. We can report on so many different platforms. We can consume news on so many different platforms. We can be exposed to fake news, and we can ourselves report fake news because our tools are just so powerful. And it's, I am not as like starry-eyed about digital. I think that along with all the good things it is giving journalists, it's also raising huge problems for not only the journalists. An example of that is I saw many journalists reporting that they had a screenshot supposedly of Donald Trump saying on his platform that he didn't tell anybody at the time, but the Queen had knighted him in private. That wasn't real. But there were journalists who were putting that on their feeds. So I think that we need better ways to know what's not real news. We need better ways. We need to like have more skills honing our judgment. Just because something looks like it came from Donald Trump's Social because it was the kind of thing Donald Trump would say, and the person was able to replicate what Truth Social looks like. And so even really trustworthy journalists thought this was something real. It was not real. So um, digital going forward, it's amazing. We really have to be careful. And the last slide here. So if you have any questions about what I've said, you can reach me, as I said, um, on Twitter or on LinkedIn or on Instagram, or you can email me at linda@digimentors.group, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that we don't get to now. And thanks, everybody.